Today on Rebel Report, we sit down with longtime Las Vegas sports reporter Ron Futrell and his time covering the Runnin Rebels in the 90s.
Plus, we discuss the first week of UNLV basketball as we look ahead for the rest of the season.
And we go over some of the roster changes the Raiders have made coming into Week 10.
Welcome to Studio G on the campus of UNLV. This is the Rebel Report. I'm Paxton Graham.
I'm Jared Feldman. Now, before we dive into the local sports news of the week, we want to tell you what we're all about. Every week, we will cover UNLV athletics, the games, the events, the athletes, and the coaches.
But we're also here to cover all of the major sporting events happening in the Southern Nevada and tell you stories you won't see anywhere else.
Let's start with our Golden Knights. Tell us about it, Paxton.
The Golden Knights are performing with an amazing start to their season. New head coach Bruce Cassidy, who moved to the Knights this season, is looking promising as the team lead. A very successful record. As the Knights have been playing away from the Fortress for the past few games, they have been nothing less than impressive. During their ongoing road trip, some players were able to celebrate some personal victories at the top of their game. Jack Eichel is the team lead for the points thus far and is with 15 points. Riley Smith and Alec Martinez both celebrated their 700th game career. John Marchessault became the first player in the franchise to score over 300 points as a Knight. Knights fans are hopeful for the continuous positive trend in the rest of their season. As the Knights have been playing far away from the Fortress for the past few games, they've been nothing less than impressive. So far, the Knights are in first place in the Pacific Division with a record of 12-2. This time last year, the Knights held a record of 8-6. Let's start with the UNLV basketball. Take it away, Jose Tabares.
Well, over the past weekend, Paxton, we had our UNLV opening night with both the Lady Rebels and the Runnin Rebels. And first, we're going to talk about our Lady Rebels. Here joined by Jade, Jared, and Chris. What are your guys' thoughts on their first game against Pepperdine?
Yeah, I think what a lot of people forget is that the first game of the season, you're not supposed to look good. Because when watching it, I think they won, they pulled out the win, but I think that at the end of the season they would win by a much larger margin. So I think that for the first game, it was a good solid win. It's also a good spot for them to see, okay, where do we need to work on? How are we going to get a rotation? And especially with Coach Roman being the first head coach, I think it was a good game for him to get adjusted.
Yeah, I want to add on to that. I think one thing that really stood out to me, I would say, in that first game was Justice Etheridge. She had a monster performance in that game in the starting role. She finished with 17 points, 9 rebounds. She had a couple big threes in that fourth quarter that really put UNLV up by a larger margin than they were already up by. So I think that was one thing that really definitely stood out to me in game one.
Yeah, there was definitely kind of a few things that probably didn't go the best. A couple of careless turnovers. Pepperdine did get a few too many rebounds. And of course, one of their players, Ali Stedman, she was the top scorer in the game as well. So a couple of things that need to be cleaned up on, but I mean, overall, it was a great win, tough win. So.
Right, and then Jade mentioned before, Coach Roman Owen, Coach Lindy just gave birth this past week. Congratulations to her. Coach Roman Owen, he's going to be taking over the team for a while. How do you guys think his first game went, and how's it going to look for the future?
I think it's going to be a smooth transition. Being coached by Coach Rowe, he's always been very dominant. He's always had his voice in there in practice and everything. So he's always kind of been ready for action, and I know that he has a personality where he's going to be able to step up. And the only thing that might take a couple adjusting is being led by a girl coach versus being led by a male coach. But having him around so much, I think it's going to be a very smooth transition.
I would say I think the team kind of didn't look like they really missed a step in game one. They kind of looked like themselves again, even though they had a new coach. I know one of the main things that Coach Lindy told us is that their middle name is rebound. So the main thing they want to do is out-rebound other teams, and they did that in game one. They out-rebounded them 37-29. So that was one thing. Also, when they had their double-digit lead in the second quarter, they didn't ever lead by single digits. They held on to that lead and looked dominant. Yeah, and just kind of going back to what you were saying, Jade, about just intensity in general, because Essence did say that in the post-game press conference. She just said, Coach Owen, he does bring the intensity kind of more than Coach Lindy does. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of just going to be the same thing, really. I mean, he's been around as long as Lindy has, so I don't think they're going to miss a beat, to be honest.
Right, and I mean, in that first game, we saw production everywhere. We saw, 3 starters score over 15 points, 3 other players scoring 8 or more, with 2 of those coming off the bench. Are we going to see this type of production consistently throughout the season?
That's a good question. I hope so, but I think that they are deep this year. They have defense, they have offense, they have rebounding. So I think if someone's shooting is not going well, they switch to someone else. They go to a driver. If the defense isn't going well, they switch to someone who rebounds and plays defense. So I think tomorrow against Oral Roberts, that will be a big test because that was a very close game last year, and they're returning a lot of their team. So I'll be interested to see that.
And then one thing I want to point out going off the bench is Alyssa Brown. She's going to be stepping into a bigger role this season. She's taken over for Nneka Obiizer, who was the 6th player of the year last year. So I think one thing to note this season is her minutes went up from 6 to 21 minutes per game. And then so did her points. They increased as well. So she went up from 9 points a game, or 2 points a game to 9 points a game. And her rebounds went up from 2 to 4. So that'll be a key player to look out for off their bench.
Yeah, and, obviously Desi and Essence are like kind of the main scorers on the team, but you have seen a couple of players like Justice is capable of having a big game. Obviously, Durazo Frescas, she didn't have the best game that last game. She only shot 1 for 6, but she's capable as well. So I think you will see a lot of them step up, and they'll have to against Oral Roberts, because in their opening game of the season, they actually only lost by 11 points to Oklahoma, who's ranked number 15. So they'll definitely have to step up in that game.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll head over to Paxton back at the desk.
Thanks, everyone at the panel. The 1989 to 1991 Runnin Rebels are a legendary team. Coach Jerry Tarkanian and the team started the basketball culture in Las Vegas. Our reporter Chris Clark had the opportunity to talk to someone who knew them very well.
We have the pleasure today to be joined by Ron Futrell, who currently works at Channel 8 and is also a longtime reporter for the Runnin Rebels back in the day when they won the national championship as well. So yeah, definitely an honor to have you here today to talk about that. So just to begin with, kind of talking about that team back in the day, let's focus first on Jerry Tarkanian. His as far as his like philosophy and that, like what made the Runnin Rebels team so great? Like what was it about his philosophy that made the team so great?
Okay, first, Chris, my pleasure. Glad to be here and do this, talk about something that was such a dynamic thing in this community. I mean, it was the passion, the heart of the community. What made the Rebels so great? It comes down to Jerry Tarkanian and Tim Gergerich as coaches and their philosophy behind, there's a number of things that I could put in here. Aggressive defense. They understood this first and foremost in college basketball, that the way to score points, and it seems antithetical a little bit, but the way to score points is have a great defense. They also had a philosophy of, Tark had, when he would set up a lineup, he would have 8 players that would be his guys that would be on the court. And the rest of the team would be what he would call practice players. And I can go down the list and tell you who is who, but you can pretty much figure it out. You can see the roster and you see who's on the bench. But what he did was, because he didn't get blue chip recruits, he'd get JUCO guys. Larry Johnson was a JUCO guy, went to SMU and then later Odessa Midland. He rarely got 5-year guys or 4-year guys that would play at UNLV. It was usually JUCO guys that no other schools didn't want, and he turned them into better players once they got here. And a lot of that was Tim Gergerich too, one of the great NBA assistant coaches. Was they made their players better when they got here.
You talked about the national championship, then the next season, obviously they're so close to being unbeaten that season, and then the loss to Duke happens. So like just being around here, what was the magnitude of that loss? Like how much was it felt by the community?
We're 32 years later, 31 years later. I still have people talk about it.
All right.
Okay, so let's go there. And they'll talk about the national championship too. But that Duke-UNLV rivalry was one of the great rivalries in college sports ever.
And then just kind of after that loss, obviously there's a transition period where all these guys are now going to the NBA. Larry Johnson, Stacey Augmon, they're all going to the NBA. So kind of building up to that draft, how obvious was it that Larry Johnson was going to be the #1 pick? Because I know, Kenny Anderson was in that draft. Dikembe Mutombo, all
Yeah.
these other big names. But like, amongst the media, was it obvious that Larry Johnson was going to be?
Oh, you
number
knew he
one?
was going to be pretty high. You
Okay.
certainly knew that
Yeah.
that 3 guys were going to go. 3 ended up going in the top 12.
Right.
Larry, Stacey, and Greg. Greg was the 12th pick by the Knicks.
Right.
And they all wore number 2, by the way, their first year in the NBA and throughout times of their NBA, as dedication to Tark,
Okay.
who they had an old picture of Tark where he played at Fresno State, and he had the number 2 on. So they all went and they agreed that we're going to wear the Tark's jersey number when we go into the pros, which they did.
Thanks, Chris. For the full interview, tune in on the Rebel Report YouTube. We now move on to opening night for our Runnin Rebels. We go back to Jose Tabarez.
Thanks for that, Jared. Part of our UNLV basketball opening night, our Runnin Rebels took on the Southern University Jaguars. How do you guys feel about how that went for the Rebels?
I mean, you know, it's all about the turnover battle. I think that was the main thing. UNLV has said that they're going to be a defensive powerhouse. That's what they want to be. That's what E.J. Harkless, that's what Jordan McCabe has said during practice, that they're going to be a physical team, and a physical team causes turnovers. And, you know, they were up by 8 going into halftime, but they came out of the game winning by 10. They had as much of a 16-point lead, and a lot of that was just because they were causing turnovers and they were getting out in transition, and that's what the team builds themselves upon.
Yeah, like you mentioned, 2 of the things that really impressed me most was their turnovers. They pressured them for 28 turnovers over the entire course of the game. And on top of that, they got to the free throw line 38 times and made 32 of them. And that's very, very impressive.
I think we see a lot of great things for this first game. Lots to improve on, but that's what the first game is for, a great evaluation game. And college games are won through physicality and hustle, right? Things like rebounds, turnovers, but more importantly, points off turnovers. And that's what the coach said is an emphasis this year. That's what they have to improve on from last year, is the points off turnovers. I think they did a really good job of doing that. They said they got up a big margin. And, just improving on the offense as they go on will be better point to go forward.
Right, and obviously Fenhouse mentioned that the defense was looking nice. The defense is what brought UNLV to the national stage long ago. And the offense, I mean, that's what we talked about just now. Their offensive efficiency wasn't too good from the three-point line, from field goals. What do you guys want to see from the offense going forward?
I think the main thing is just build a half-court offense that's sustainable. They shot 15% from 3. They shot under 40% from the field that game. And turnovers are great. And, 28 turnovers is a phenomenal thing to have, and the points off turnovers were good. But you don't get 28 turnovers every single night. And there are going to be times where when they score, you have to bring it up to half-court. You have to run that half-court offense. And I'm interested to see what they're going to do this year. There are going to be some players that need to step up. And I think the main thing is it going to be a balanced scoring attack that day one? Is it going to be multiple players chipping in, or is it going to be one major star that's going to shine for this team and be that offensive powerhouse? Unfortunately, I think, in this first game and even throughout some of the practices, they haven't really figured that out yet. And they're still looking forward to seeing what that's going to be for them this year.
One of the biggest keys is by playing complementary basketball. And it starts with the defense. Defense wins championships, and through that, they showed a great defensive outing this past game. And they need to continue that, but by playing great defense, it's going to set up your offense, because defense has a great offensive mentality, playing together, making sure you're moving the ball around so that you can get the ball in the bucket. And like we said, the percentages were not high, but by alleviating that, you got to start working yourself in, then come out, because you're moving the ball, you're driving, you're kicking it out, you're going to gain confidence, and you're going to be playing as a team.
That's a great point about the half-court offense, because you can see this is a very guard-heavy squad, right? I think they have 8 guards in the entire roster. So they like to move fast, which is good, moving transition, get those fast break points. But more just letting the play develop and forcing shots. All right, because that three-point shot's going to come, because a lot of colleges like to play that zone defense. So that three-point shot's going to come. So I think that just those first game jitters, getting that out the way, and that three-point shot will come for sure. Just don't force the play, don't force the shot.
Right, and we obviously have a lot of transfers this year. Coach Kruger, his second year with the team, has to put together another team with transfers. Losing out on Bryce Hamilton and Donovan Williams, that's obviously big for shot creation. Who this year do you guys see filling that role in shot creation, and who are they going to give the ball to get a bucket?
I think it's going to be tough to fill that role because Bryce Hamilton was 6th in the nation in scoring last year in points per game. Donovan Williams was 6th man of the year. He was 6th in the nation in three-point percentage. I think one of the guys that's going to have to step up is E.J. Harkless, the transfer from Oklahoma. He averaged 10 points. Jordan McCabe hopes that he's going to be a center point of their balanced scoring attack. That's what he said on Thursday after practice. So that's going to be interesting to see what happens there with him. Another guy that I think is going to step up, he was in the starting lineup, but off the bench, I think he's going to have a very important role in making sure that the bench has that offensive firepower. It's going to be Jackie Johnson III. For me, he's been phenomenal. I've seen him in practice. He seems maybe like the best shot creator on the team. I think Keyshawn Gilbert's in there mostly for the defensive prowess. That's why they put him in the starting lineup. But Jackie Johnson, E.J. Harkless are going to be important. I'm expecting Keyshawn's going to be forced to make a jump offensively because if you're coming in the starting lineup, you're going to be expected to make plays on the offensive end. And then maybe one other guy, if I had to pick, would be Carl Jones. Carl Jones didn't get much playing time. He mainly come in when Iwako and David Mwaka were in foul trouble, but he is a really big, dominant player. He has a lot of Shaq-like ability in terms of just getting up on the rim and just thunderously throwing it down. And if they can bring those guys onto the team, it's going to be, really important to see what they can do.
Yeah, last game, Harkless got into double digits, Gilbert got into double digits, Johnson got into double digits. However, I think through that, it wasn't because they made their own shot. It was through the full court press that they had. It was a zone press. They caused 28 turnovers, and in order to do that, you have to have great communication, great chemistry with one another, and most importantly, you have to play as a team. And I think that's going to be the focus going forward because their focus at the end of the year is to make the dance, the big dance, NCAA tournament, and by doing so, you have to play as a team, and by playing as a team on offense, you have to pass the ball, and you need to get the assist up because this past game, they only had 10 assists.
Yeah. I think you pointed out best. You said all the great players, right? But I think more so a big focus is the depth of the whole lineup. Because we've seen they went up by 16 points, so you got to keep that intensity throughout the entire game, and that comes with your depth. Right? So your starting lineup can go out and put on a show, but it's always up to those guys that come from behind you that's going to keep that same intensity and keep the game going. Right? So I think it's a big role from the bench guys to step on up and fulfill their roles.
Cool. Well, that's going to be it for our UNLV basketball discussions today. Thank you, Fenhaas, Wyatt, and Justin. We're going to send it right back to the desk.
We have another weekend of UNLV basketball. The Lady Rebels will take on Oral Roberts today at 3:30 at the Cox Pavilion. The Runnin Rebels will play next door at the Thomas & Mack tomorrow against Incarnate Word at 3 p.m.
The NBA season is off to a crazy start. We go to Nick Sylvester for more on the biggest surprises from the first month of action.
Thanks, Jared. This NBA season is off to an unusual start with the teams we expected to be lottery teams sitting at the top of their respective conferences. To start the season, the Utah Jazz traded away their two best players and all-stars Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert and sit atop the Western Conference standings with a record of 10-3. Now, while this is definitely a surprise to most, the biggest surprise of the season thus far has to be the Lakers, Nets, Warriors, and Heat sitting at the bottom of the standings of their respective conferences. The Nets with a record of 5-7, while the Heat and Warriors each sit with a record of 4-7. And the Lakers are 2-9 with by far the most disappointing start to the season, especially to a team that is arguably the greatest player of all time on it and who's hungry for another championship. Now, the so-called juggernauts of the league have been disappointing to say the least, and while the Nets, Heat, and Warriors seem to be off to sluggish starts, the Warriors in particular, who are coming off a championship this past season. There's still no real concern given the talent of those teams, but the Lakers are an entirely different story with no real answers in sight for them to turn it around and to compete for a championship this season. And with LeBron in his 20th season and not getting any younger, there needs to be a real conversation surrounding this team's future and what they will do when it comes to putting together a team that can compete, and one that can do so in a hurry. With LeBron's reign of escaping father time seemingly coming to an end in the near future, this NBA season's had a lot of surprises, and in the early going, will be interesting to see what the rest of the season has in store. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Nick. Now we head over to the asphalt with Dominic Lavoie, who has a recap on Vegas native Noah Gragson, his final season in Xfinity.
Thank you for that, Jared. Now, with Kurt Busch's retirement from full-time NASCAR Cup Series competition at the end of this year, there will be a new Las Vegas native in the NASCAR Cup Series to take his spot in 2023, that native being Noah Gragson. The Bishop Gorman graduate won a staggering 8 races this season, while also scoring 21 top 5s and 26 top 10s in 33 races on the year. Gregson also tied Sam Ard's 1983 record for the most consecutive wins in NASCAR Xfinity Series history at 4 in a row. And Gregson already also captured the elusive Homestead Miami Speedway trophy after a streak of bad luck prevented him from winning that race. And despite his success this year, he fell just short in the championship race, finishing second to Ty Gibbs. And after championship weekend in Phoenix, Gregson reflected on his time in the Xfinity Series.
Grateful to be able to have the opportunity these last 4 years with Junior Motorsports. Our 9 team is so tight and we have so much fun. Would have loved to close the year out with a championship, but not meant to be. We just needed to be better tonight. But one thing I'll remember in 20 years is just the relationships that we had with everybody in the garage.
Now, Noah Gragson hits the track for NASCAR Cup Series action next year with GMS Racing for his first taste of full-time NASCAR Cup competition. And he also comes back to his home track March 5th for the Pennzoil 400 here at Las Vegas Motor Speedway. And now moving to our own football team, the Rebel football team that is, Doug Brumfield. He made his return to the field after being out multiple weeks due to an injury he suffered against San Jose State, and he came back against San Diego State. But his presence couldn't lift the Rebels to a win. Brumfield looked like his usual self aside from throwing 2 interceptions and only rushing for a total of 5 yards on 12 rushing attempts. Brumfield and the Rebels have 3 games left to salvage a winning record this season. All our conference games against Fresno State, Hawaii, and closing out the season at home against the University of Nevada, Reno for the Fremont Cannon.
Thank you, Dom. The Raiders linebacker Divine Diablo has been placed on the injured reserve list after suffering from a forearm injury during the Week 9 game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. Diablo will be out for at least 4 games, with his return due back in Week 14 of the regular season when they face off the Los Angeles Rams. In a shocking surprise move, the Raiders have released former first-round pick Jonathan Abram. In his 4 seasons as a Raider, he made 3 interceptions and 245 combined tackles. Speaking of the Raiders, they lost their Week 9 matchup against the Jaguars 27-20. Let's go to Diego Escobar for more on the game.
Thanks, Paxton. The Raiders keep failing to stay in the win column as the loss to the Jacksonville Jaguars now pushes the Raiders to 2-6. So let's take a look at the game. The Raiders got off to a hot start this game, especially early as the defense was able to get 2 big stops, and one of those stops ended up being a fumble recovery. The offense started off hot as well. Derek Carr and Devontae Adams were reliving their Fresno days as they were connecting all along the field, which led to 2 touchdowns. The other receivers in Hunter Renfrow and Mac Hollins were also able to make their mark on the game by making some very clutch catches for the Raiders. Even before the half, the Raiders defense was still hitting hard and doing their best to stop the Jaguars' attack by making big stops and bringing up passes. Unfortunately, the Raiders' control over the game did not last long, as the Jaguars came back and took away the Raiders' lead, beating the Raiders by 1 score as the game clock ran out. Now, this marks the 3rd Raiders loss that they have been blowing a 20-point lead, and this continues to be the trend of the Raiders losing by just 1 score. However, they look forward to this week's matchup against the Colts that should put the team back on easy street. However, they are going to do this without a few key defensive players, and now without star tight end and Darren Waller and wide receiver Hunter Renfrow both now being put on IR. With that being said, here are your 3 keys to victory that the team needs to succeed. Key 1, contain the run. If you have noticed, it seems to be a running theme for the Raiders, especially since the teams that they have faced have really good running backs. So if you can keep Jonathan Taylor at bay, the Raiders should have a better chance of staying in control. Key 2, get after the quarterback. The Colts have a backup quarterback starting for them at the moment, and if you stop him, you can keep the time of possession for the Colts down to a minimum. And key 3, keep the foot on the gas. The Raiders have had trouble with finishing the games they have played all season. So if the Raiders keep up the pressure and play the second half as they played the first half, the Raiders should have no problem getting a win this Sunday. Back to you guys at the desk.
Thanks, Diego. Next up, we have Wyatt Touche in studio for a preview of UFC 281.
UFC 281 takes place Saturday, November 12th at Madison Square Garden. The prelims start at 5 o'clock and the main card begins at 7. This event will be electrifying and entertaining. Names such as Dan Hooker, Dustin Poirier, Carlos Esparza, and Israel Adesanya are few to know. This is much-watched TV, so tune in, because next time we will discuss what happened. Back to you at the desk.
Thanks, Wyatt. Championship Sunday took place this last weekend, but not in your traditional sports. To tell us more, here's Sebastian Rooney.
Welcome back to your Esports Update. My name is Sebastian Rooney, and I'm here to give you all you need to know about esports at UNLV, in Las Vegas, and internationally. Let's start with League of Legends and Overwatch. Both games had their biggest championship weekend happen, the League of Legends World Championship and the Overwatch League playoffs. In League, we saw a Cinderella story come to life. DRX, who were underdogs all the way from the play-ins, fought their way to the grand final. They faced the most decorated team in the sport, T1. And it took all 5 maps, but in the end, DRX, the biggest underdog in League history, sit atop the mountain as champions.
10 seconds on owner. DRX will march forward. Kyria wants to hit the wave. Kingen goes to the whirlwinder. Gumayushi is dead. They have been doubted. They have been discounted. They have been dismissed. But DRX are your 2022 World Champion.
Overwatch also saw their season come to fruition over the weekend, but unlike League, there was no underdogs to really root for. The San Francisco Shock, who got sent into the losers bracket early by the Houston Outlaws, got their revenge in the end as they were able to send the Outlaws packing in the losers bracket finals by way of a sweep. Unfortunately, they were unable to capitalize on that momentum as they fell to the Dallas Fuel in the grand finals. The Shock put up a good fight, taking the field all the way to map 5, but they were unable to finish the deed as the top team of the season caps it off with a championship victory.
The bomb's going to be there, but it's going to be forced away. He's in grave danger indeed. The touch is there from Striker. He has a death blossom, but there's no chance. The Dallas Fuel take their place amongst the stars to burn brighter than them all, rising to become your 2022 Overwatch League champions.
And finally, the Gaming Rebels will be hosting their Rebel Gaming Prom on November 18th from 2 to 7 in the UNLV Student Union Ballrooms. If you are interested, be sure to check out the Rebel Gaming Discord and RSVP. And that's it. My name is Sebastian Rooney, and this has been your Vegas Esports Update.
Thanks, Sebastian. Next, we have Barry Sabine with his club spotlight featuring the UNLV rock climbing team.
At UNLV Rebel Report, we try to cover every sport and every club. For this week's Club Spotlight, I bring you the Rock Climbing Club.
UNLV Rock Climbing Club is returning back to the summit after a brief hiatus from COVID. Taz Goon, a UNLV senior who has been coming to the Nevada Climbing Center since 2015, has always wanted to find a way to share climbing with the campus of UNLV.
Started the club back up again with just the simple desire to share our love of climbing with others. And now we have over 40 members and we climb 3 days a week.
Alan Morris is an original member that returned to the club. He had this to say for people that may think rock climbing is a little too dangerous for them.
Rock climbing kind of seems like an oddball sport from the outside looking in. It seems very scary and dangerous, but it's not. It's actually a really cool way to build a community with your friends. And it has a very low barrier to entry. It doesn't cost that much to join. It gets you outside. You get a lot of good exercise. It's super fun, and I've met so many good people through this club.
Isabel Artrano and Holly O'Donnell spoke to the crucial part of trusting themselves as the climber and rope holder.
Just climbing with everyone, like every Wednesday, we can build like a strong relationship, and we just trust each other like that.
Because it's a repeating group of people that come every Wednesday, the trust does build.
As you can see, the Rock Climbing Club is a very lively group of people. They're interested in new members, so just come on down to the Nevada Climbing Center every Wednesday. They'll be happy to have you here. For Barry Sabine, reporting for Rebel Report, this has been your Club Spotlight.
Next up, Jay Thomas sits down with UNLV psychologist Dr. Raven Townsell to discuss student-athletes' mental health.
Thank you, Paxton. And today for our mental health segment, we have Dr. Raven Townsell, one of the newest members to the sports psychology team here at UNLV. Raven, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for being here today.
Glad to be here.
So you are a part of the student athlete psychology group, and you really took initiative to get that kick-started this year. Why did you feel like it was so important to really take charge of that?
Yeah, after meeting with that group and just seeing how passionate they were about,
sending proper messages about mental health, destigmatizing mental health amongst athletes. They really wanted to provide, athletes with resources for mental health, and overall just be a support for each other and supporting each other through mental health. And I feel like all of those initiatives perfectly aligned with what it means to be a sports psychologist. And I was just like, I can't deny them that, right? Like, that's something I absolutely have to support. I feel like, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't support that. And I'm so glad that I did, because they are doing wonderful things.
That's awesome. And you talked a little bit about destigmatizing mental health. When do you think that mental health really got the people's attention and people started taking it seriously?
Honestly, I feel like the turn happened when it started to become more of a conversation at the pro level, and people started to realize, these aren't machines, like, they're people, and they have problems and day-to-day concerns just like everyone else. And I think to see people on that level of play and, have the platform that they do, be open and honest about talking about their mental health, made it a lot easier for people that look up to them and hope to be at that level to say, hey, maybe this is something that, we need to address, across all levels of sport.
Mm-hmm. And we had one of the members, Kiana Wilfred, on our last episode, and she talked about the mental health games that you guys do. So having a reach like that not only impacts student athletes, but also everyone at the game, everyone who saw it. So what are these mental games for? Like, what is the purpose?
Yeah, so the mental health awareness games, the purpose, again, is just to bring awareness to mental health, provide a space where people can have conversations about mental health, and that's what really helps, that destigmatization process. And I think that being able to have people know that there are resources that they can connect to and provide them with those resources are a really good, goal and purpose of those games.
Yeah, and for those who are not student athletes and are still interested in mental health, what do you suggest they do, or tips do you have for them?
Yeah, so if there's anyone like in the community, I would definitely encourage them to reach out to any community providers that they may be have access to or know where to find access to, and that's, a simple Google search. If you're here at UNLV, a student here, or any student athlete on any campus, most college campuses have counseling centers that students can reach out to. I know we have one here at UNLV, and I definitely encourage students, if they are concerned about their mental health or not really sure if what they're dealing with is mental health related, to reach out to our counseling center here to get that additional support.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
That's all we have for our mental health discussion today. Back to you at the desk.
Thanks, Jade. For this week's community highlight, we have chosen to tell you about High Roller Wheelchair Rugby Foundation.
This nonprofit is meant to help permanently injured and disabled athletes to play rugby like any other athlete. Marie Perrant has more on this.
UNLV graduate Brett Lebeau founded High Rollers Adaptive Sport Foundation after a tragic diving accident at Lake Tahoe left him in a wheelchair. The High Roller Foundation is a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a supportive community for disabled and injured individuals through adaptive sport opportunities. They promote and equip teams in order to allow permanently injured athletes to find joy and help in sport. They say adaptive sports are the best therapy for long life recovery following a life-changing injury. One of their programs, the Rugby Team Foundation, is a nationally ranked program that allows injured players to be a part of the team. The team hopes to expand in order to include both competitive and recreational teams. Through their backpack programs, the foundation helps newly injured players to adapt through their new life and provide them support through sports. The High Roller Foundation is the only sport team for quadriplegic in Southern Nevada. They help injured athletes to remain active and employed. If you want to volunteer or donate, you can do so on their website by scrolling all the way down and hit the donate button. My name is Murray Squires, and I'm reporting for Rebel Report.
And before we go, this just in, the Dollar Loan Center is offering free tickets for the NBA G League Ignite game. The game is happening on Saturday. Tip-off is at 7 p.m., so make sure you grab a free ticket. And that's going to do it for us here today. Thank you for tuning in.
If you haven't already, make sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And make sure you listen to the Rebel Report podcast every Saturday on Spotify. Thank you for watching.